Welcome back to another edition of Homeland Security Off the Record. My guest now is Salvador Zamora. As always, my guest bios are rather long, so you can find them in the description below. Sal was the first person I met when I started going down to the border in late '05. Sal, why don't you just give a little background about yourself first and what your title was when you finally decided to retire from HQ in D.C.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Again, it's a pleasure to speak with you. Hopefully, one of these days we can do it in person. And thank you for having me on your show. Always a pleasure to have these conversations. Very important national security, border security conversation.
Well, it's always an honor to have you on, Sal.
And we, like you said, we go back a ways. But briefly, I started with the United States Border Patrol in 1994, right? That's during the Gatekeeper era. If you remember, it was Operation Hold the Line in El Paso and Operation Gatekeeper. That was the full international, I would say, concerted effort to gain control of the border. That started in San Diego, California. So I was part of that big rush of hires in early '94. Moved up the ranks in San Diego, and when 9/11 happened, not only did I respond with my team to LaGuardia Airport to help support, calm some of those fears and help support our brothers and sisters in blue there, NYPD and Port Authority, other missions that we were tasked with after 9/11. That obviously was the beginning of the stand-up of the Department of Homeland Security. And then soon thereafter, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, which really unified several agencies, right? Immigration and Naturalization Service, also the Border Patrol became part of CBP, and the agriculture side of the house also was rolled up into CBP, and that sort of drew me to headquarters in 2003. I did 2-3 years there in international affairs, public affairs, managing several programs to include some policy introductions there on behalf of the Border Patrol. And like all good deeds in the government, right? Hey, you did your great job here. Now it's time to go out to the field. At the end of the day, I mean, we're Border Patrol agents, law enforcement officers. So we go into an office environment for a little while, and then it pushes out to the field. I went to El Paso. I was there for 2006 to 2012, and that's where I met you shortly after taking command of the El Paso station. I remember you came out, we had a ride along there, and you got to see firsthand some of the operational challenges and a lot of the threats that we were encountering back in that time frame, right? That was 2006, 2008. Then I was promoted up to take command of a couple of Border Patrol stations. One in Isleta, and then came back to California, in Calexico, California, and continued rising up the leadership ranks there. And the last 3 years of my 26-and-a-half-year career, I did in Washington, D.C. So kind of ended up running the strategic communication division. They really stood it up from nothing. All the Facebook channels you have, the social media channels that you have right now are thanks to yours truly. That was quite an undertaking.
Yes,
especially in we pretty much gave a microphone, right? A international global microphone to the frontline men and women to tell the Border Patrol story. So that I'm very proud to have closed out my career telling the Border Patrol story. And here I am on your show doing the same thing, right? They're not just stories, but they're really true accounts, insightful accounts of the challenges that the men and women in green face every day. And some of the politics and not so pretty stuff that goes on in the career of a law enforcement agency, especially as it's dealing with immigration issues.
Yeah, and I continued going down to the border. I spent time down at Nogales with the port director down there, and I believe it was the Tucson sector CDP supervisor, Office of Air and Marine.
Sure.
Spent time over in New Mexico, and finally made my way down to RGV, or the Rio Grande Valley area. So didn't make it to California, but I was in a lot of the other hot spots. I know perfectly well what was going on at the time, which I guess is a good lead into asking you, where are we at? I mean, where are we at now with the numbers of apprehensions versus the numbers who are making it through the gaps?
Yeah.
And how much bigger of a problem would you estimate that it is, say, compared to back in 05, 06, and
Yeah.
that time period when there was a lot going on, especially with the violence from the cartels, now transnational criminal organizations that were basically running all the northern Mexican regions.
Right. You know, as I was telling you, my, career trajectory, in the back of my mind, I was kind of reliving some of those moments of craziness along the southwest border, right? The hundreds of thousands of people that we used to apprehend in San Diego in the early 90s. And I remember telling myself, I think I remember being around that time was 1.2 million apprehensions, 1.6 million apprehensions, and they were breaking records, right? We were just besides ourselves as an agency, trying to comprehend what is 1.2 million encounters, what is 1.6 million encounters mean, and well, it meant that there was no order, that there was chaos, there were no consequences, that there was no no control, no, whatever term you want to use, it was no manageability of that area. And slowly but surely we started seeing the infrastructure come, right? If you remember back in the day, it was the corrugated steel landing mat that we
Right.
had as a border wall, border fence. And this is all DOD surplus goods that, with the Army Corps of Engineers helping us, with some JTF North missions and Border Patrol agents welding and patching those panels together to
Oh,
build
yeah.
what we have as a primary barrier. And really the focus then was to stop the vehicles that were coming unabated, Tony, right through the old time mountain hills, right, with people and narcotics. And so as I'm telling you this trajectory of mine, I'm thinking back, wow, that was craziness, that was mayhem. And then you ask me, what has changed. It's sad to say that, man, those, not a whole lot has changed. In terms of the number of people we're encountering has surpassed like 22, 25-year records that we thought would never, never happen. I think, recent data that I have just with Border Patrol year to date, this is FY23 year to date, we've surpassed 2 million encounters. Where in the entire fiscal year for 2022, there were 1.6, 1.7 million encounters. If we're coming up, on closing out the fiscal year, and we're already at 2 million, what is the end of this fiscal year? What does the next fiscal year have in store for us? And I think that's kind of what I want to elaborate a little bit and provide some insights right on this show. So the numbers are just one piece, and you talked about that's what we know. Right.
Exactly.
We know what we know. We have people turning themselves in groups of 20, groups of 50. There are places on the southwest border right now, Border Patrol facilities, that have never encountered a group of 60, 70, 100, 400 at one time. And that's almost commonplace. So not only are the facilities not adequate to deal with a group of 100, 200 people, but there's not enough agents to manage this influx. And, you talked about most of the folks that we're encountering. Yes, they are probably here to seek a better life. They are probably here for economic reasons. But the law of numbers, right? The law of numbers, I'm always fascinated at. We focus on what we know.
Mm-hmm.
In law enforcement, what keeps us up at night and why we do what we do is to really focus on what we don't know, or what is not being shared on mainstream media, or what people are maybe refuse to focus on is the 10%. The 10% of the population of 2 million people is still a lot of people. And that 10% we know is the criminal element, right? Those are the ones that are taking advantage of the other 90%. A.
Exactly, yeah.
B, those are the ones that want to get away. And so again, even that 10% that we arrest of the 100% of the people that we encounter are persona non gratas. But we don't have what we call situational awareness. We don't have cameras. We don't have sensors. We don't have agents in a good portion of the 2,000-mile border. So if 10% want to get away and we happen to interdict them and arrest them, I would venture that number is larger of those folks who manage to elude our detection, manage to elude our apprehension. And that's really what should be of concern to us, right? The 90%, the asylum seekers, the Guatemalan, the Honduran, the Mexican nationals who are, yes, violating our laws, yes, they're coming across illegally, but who don't have a criminal record, we know who they are, and with a great deal of certainty, we know that they're non-criminal aliens. The 10% wanting to get away, the 10% that are in stash houses, the 10% that are in load vehicles, the 10% that we apprehend, right, in the middle of nowhere by themselves, the sexual predators, the drug traffickers, those are the ones, Tony, that we really focus on, but we really can't because we're so inundated with managing, processing, detaining those who turn themselves in. Right. That I think is what needs to come out into the public, and more people need to discuss about that 10%, the criminal element, and then what is that percent of the gotaways, right? People use the term gotaway. Mm-hmm. That is someone who detected or came across undetected, and we know nothing about, other than we know that there were either footprints in the sand or technology positioned in certain areas along the border did identify an illegal crossing of a undocumented migrant, of an illegal alien, but there was no agent available to go and detect, identify, and classify that incursion, right? There was nobody there to make that arrest. That population is growing exponentially. It's another, really another 10 to 15% of what we do encounter.
And we don't know who they are.
We don't know who they are. There's so much to share about the backgrounds of these folks, right? More recently, we started hearing the TSDBs, right? That's the terrorist screening database. These are folks that have some affiliation, right? Some nexus, some relationship to a terrorist activity. And we know that those numbers have been made public. Those numbers have increased in the last 2 or 3 years. Now, that doesn't mean that they're terrorists, Tony. Mm-hmm. But it means definitely that they are people of interest. And so if those numbers are increasing at the same rate as the encounters, what the law of numbers, what happens when those TSDB hits into the hundreds or the thousands? Are we going to wait for something to happen here in the United States of America to be able to then react and dial down our enforcement issue along the southwest border? You mentioned on your LinkedIn post, and something that I've been tracking closely, right? The Russian military deserters.
Yeah, I was asking Todd Bensman about that earlier. You're finding them; they're coming across.
We knew something was going to happen when, obviously, President Putin, it started the so-called draft, right? They started bringing in new personnel, and you had the deserters, and it's happened from time to time from different countries. This is not the first time, but the vulnerability that exists in that Alaskan area, right? The where these folks came from Russia onto U.S. territory, and then eventually we brought them into the country. That should be a big red flag. And I just ask ourselves, if we have some technology on the southwest border, and I just shared with you what that looks like, what do you think is happening in the northern border where we have no technology? We have very little agents to patrol, the 5,000 miles with Canada, and or specifically in this area where the Russian deserters, military deserters, came across. Yeah, that's why when we say it's not an immigration issue, that's a subset of a national security issue, right? That's just one of it's like cybersecurity.
Right.
Right. Immigration, illegal immigration is just like cybersecurity in that it's under the umbrella of national security. So border security is national security. Does really mean something to us.
What is this situation where it's not Customs and Border Protection or Border Patrol? It's coming on from, I'll say, the Secretary on down. Just absolutely not, or defying, the Immigration and Naturalization Act, which makes things very clear what shall be done. Of course, shall legislatively means it will be done. And so, what is going on with the busing of so many migrants everywhere? We don't have a send back policy anymore.
No.
And Title 42, I guess, they're ratcheting that down even. Well, eventually they're just going to get rid of it entirely.
Right. For just a little clarification, right? For your audience who, in many instances, have a very pragmatic understanding of border security, which probably is something we should adopt, right? Because I think we overcomplicate it sometimes. I guess what I'm saying is clarifying, right, for your audience that the Border Patrol, specifically the Border Patrol, certainly CBP as a whole, interdicts people from all walks of life, from Afghanistan to Zimbabwe, right? They 125 different nationalities every year, and each one based on not only the nationality, the region of the country they're in, is dealt with a little bit different, right? We're not only dealing with Mexican nationals, right? The 2 million people that we encountered, for example, the Border Patrol encountered last year, it's not just Mexican nationals where, you do a quick search and enroll in a biometrics database and find out who they are, and then if they're bad guys, people, they go to jail or deport them, or if they're not bad guys, then they go back south, right? That was like early 90s, where a good number of the population was Mexican nationals, and then it evolved to the Central American, right? Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala. And although there were Spanish-speaking countries within the Americas, a similar process would ensue. There was a lot of information that we were getting from El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, in that we were able to identify them, verify identity. The biometrics process was being used, the facial recognition, and so that we would, with a great deal of certainty, arrest somebody and know who they were, and then adjudicate that accordingly. Again, bad guy goes to jail, not so bad guy, we deport you back to your country. And deporting means either through a flight from the U.S. right into that country, or we're using buses many times from Mexico into Guatemala, Honduras, or El Salvador. In comes a lot of different nationalities into that mix, and so each one has a different, again, adjudication process. All this to say that it is a very complex system that we have to work with. you try to bucket people, so to speak. I hate to use the
Mm-hmm.
term, right? Because they're humans, but at the end of it, you start bucketing them so you can deal with them, you know, humanely, accordingly. Um, all Spanish-speaking individuals under Title 42, right? That was a Center for Disease Control authority that was bestowed on immigration enforcement officers to be able to prevent the entry of people because we didn't know if they were vaccinated, we didn't know if they were carrying COVID. And so that was in place for quite some time. And that helped stem the flow. That helped slow down the number of people. Not only it slowed the flow from Mexico into the United States, from people from all nationalities, but it also sent a message to those home countries. Hey, I can't travel right now to enter illegally because I'm going to get caught into this web of Title 42. So that was one authority that we had that was working. The other one is remain in Mexico, as we say, right? These are accords that we struck, the government of U.S. struck with the government of Mexico, mostly Spanish-speaking individuals that would have to wait their time, their term in line in Mexico. If you were coming into the United States to seek asylum because you were fearing persecution, for whatever reason, you would come through the port of entry or in between the port of entry, you claimed asylum. We did a basic immigration review. Then we said, okay, here's your ticket, here's your number, wait in Mexico until your case is called. That was another very effective tool to slow the flow of what now we have 2 million people, right? So they were honoring due process, at the same time honoring some type of a border manageability process.
My name is Robert Kaiser. I'm the CEO of PPSS Group, and I absolutely trust the next generation of our high-performance body armor. And so can you.
Those obviously have been entangled in different lawsuits, and slowly they have been withering away, which has sent the signal to the bad guys, because it's the transnational criminal organizations who are profiting from this chaos.
Right? Yeah, it's not the cartels have evolved into these transnational criminal organizations.
They own the operational landscape of the border, and if they know that we're bogged down with 2 million people, asylum seekers, where Border Patrol agents are having to care, feed, transport, detain migrants. Well, I just talked about miles and miles of border that are left open where they can freely move their narcotics through without any type of impedance. And so that's on one hand. So they're making money on the areas that are left unattended because the law enforcement is caring for, feeding, transporting the migrants. So they're using that territory to their advantage, but also at the same time, they're coordinating, charging, exploiting extorting the migrants who are coming to the United States. So they're making money hand over fist on one side because they're controlling the movement of migrants to the areas where they're bogging down the system and they're making money there. But they're also benefiting from the areas that are left open and moving their narcotics. I mean, you have had this conversation. What does this mean to the Border Patrol agent? I just recently traveled to Rio Grande Valley, El Paso, Yuma, I'm in El Centro today. And up and down the border, the agents are disenfranchised. They're tired, they're deflected. And I think a good portion of them feel that we have abandoned them. And America has abandoned them. Because they are carrying this weight, the weight of not knowing who got away. Right? The weight of knowing that a percentage of this population is a criminal element that can very well be in your community, my community, and it is causing quite a bit of problems in the United States, right? And it's their job to stop that, and they can't stop it. So how do you think that makes them feel?
Yeah, it is very demoralizing. I was concerned, eventually that this was going to happen if this unprecedented flow coming across the border was not stopped some way, or at least slowed down.
Right. And I think that you used the key term there. Border Patrol agents are, I mean, they understand this immigration phenomenon probably more than most pundits, immigration experts out there, right? Because they see the desperation every single day. And so I would venture to say that most Border Patrol agents don't even use the word, we're going to stop everything from coming into this country, because that's almost unrealistic. But we have to have a managing system. We have to own the system. We have to be able to manage it effectively. Imagine if you didn't manage the security of your home. What type of life would you live not knowing if at any given hour of the day someone was going to enter your home unabated?
Exactly.
And so if this is our home and we're serious about our home, the strengthening the front line, the border, is step number one. So I think again, these agents don't really, none of the strategy says we will completely seal the border, stop everything that's coming through. But clearly, if 2 million encounters, if 80% of those will present themselves at a port of entry, now you have an orderly process. Now you have time to be able to fully know who's coming in. Then we determine whether we allow you to come in or not, because it's no different than the analogy of your house. You decide who comes into your house. Yeah, that's a conversation that weighs heavy on the agent's mind, because so much progress has been made, right? From one administration to another, sometimes it's a step forward, 2 steps back. But nonetheless, there's been progress. Since the early 90s, there's been progress. There's been infrastructure, there's been technology, there's been roads. But it seems as though in these last 2-3 years, not only have we not taken a step forward, we're running backwards, and we're ceding. I think the agents believe that we have given up the real estate that so many endured and labored to take control of, right? Meaning real estate, the 2,000 miles that we have with Mexico, the gains that we've made, not only in maintaining a certain level of surveillance, maintaining a certain level of order, has gone back to like the 1990s when I first came.
Well, that reminds me of the integrated fixed tower system and the associated CCTV systems that were put in place.
Yep.
How many integrated fixed towers have actually been installed after
Yeah,
the.
there's several. We talked a little bit about the 2,000-mile border. Has some level of natural barrier and some physical barrier, right? Border fencing, border wall. Backing that up, you have some areas that have roads. Roads are important because you can't just have a wall without agents being able to access the border wall, the border, and so roads and infrastructure are important. But one thing that, again, we saw starting to evolve and starting to take hold is the variety of different technology, right? Whether it's underground sensors, right? We call them UGS, the linear ground detection system, just fiber optic with all kinds of, gizmos and gadgets that help detect an incursion when somebody drives across, somebody jumps across, runs across. Then you have your detection capability, your video detection capability, whether it's the integrated fixed towers, IFTs, or whether you have your, now we're in the 21st century, we have autonomous surveillance towers, right? We have AST. And then you still have some legacy technology, the regional video surveillance systems. Those are the RVSSs. I think you refer to them as CCTVs. Essentially, it is camera, pan, tilt, zoom, mostly radar, microwave feeds. There is some direct feeds, but yeah. So you have your RVSSs, your IFTs, and your ASTs, and then you have your mobile platforms, right? They're call them scope trucks back in the day. Now they're M2 S2s. Real sophisticated name. We are starting to see some of that technology. Oh, can't forget the blimps, right? The TARs, those aerial surveillance type of system. So right now that technology is deployed, but you got to remember it's 2,000 miles of border, and some of the most right.
That was going to be my next question. If whatever system it is, if an alarm goes off, a sensor system or a camera, you're catching somebody, but how long is it going to take for an agent to get to that area, or agents if you're dealing with a number who've been sensed through these technologies coming across? Border Patrol agents sometimes can't get there quick enough.
Right. To answer the question, I mean, in terms of how many cameras, I don't know how many cameras, but I would venture to say that in terms of video detection capability of the 2,000-mile border, I would venture to say that we're probably covering about 45% of video detection. The other you cover through other different means, right? And that's just based on some just very gross math in terms of how many fixed towers, how many RVSS towers, how many ASTs. But all that to say is the picture that I want to paint there is that there's areas that are just open. Yes, they do have some fencing, and they do have some technology in some places. But even if that technology, whether it's automated and it does it for you, where it detects, identifies, and alerts you of an incursion, or whether there's an agent behind the screen, right? Pan, zoom, tilting, and looking at an area. It still, takes agents a long time to respond, because there are, again, less agents deployed per shift, per day, per week in a particular area. Because if you have a group of 150 and you have 10, 15 agents per shift, 20 agents per shift assigned to a 40-mile area, yeah, those agents are going to have to go and deal with those 400 people that just crossed, right? The people that are turning themselves in, right? We call them give-ups. Right? The Border Patrol calls those give-ups versus gotaways. So yeah, that area is now left unattended. And if there was a detection, if there was some type of an incursion, the likelihood of an agent getting there is slim to none, especially if it's 10, 15, 20 miles out. And unfortunately, a term that we're using more and more is NUA, no unit available, because that's the agent telling dispatch or telling that agent, yes, I know you have an incursion. Yes, I know you're telling me that there's been an alarm, some type of a sensor that fired, but I can't make it there in time, safely. I can't make it there at all, or there's nobody available right. And then the other term that is used synonymously with that is godly. And you have to understand, Tony, that these are terms that are not palatable to a law enforcement guy. Imagine a police officer, city, county, state trooper, law enforcement officer, knowing that there's a shooting somewhere, knowing that there's a criminal activity, seeing it, and saying, I can't get there. I can't respond. That's unheard of. That's unheard of. And that's what's happening along our southern border.
Yeah. If it was in any city, by and large, the public wouldn't stand for it.
Right.
And so there's a disconnect between that and what's going on at the border. And I'm not really sure what the disconnect is, other than people just don't understand what is really going on.
Yeah, I think thinking, first of all, in the scenario of a city cop, a state trooper addressing a crime, responding to a crime, the reason why those entities are successful is because there's a consequence to the person committing a crime. If you drive your car at a high rate of speed, the state trooper is going to pull you over and you're going to pay a hefty fine. Your insurance goes up, right? And or you get incarcerated. That's a consequence.
Mm-hmm.
The trooper is not going to let you go if you're speeding at 120 miles an hour in a 55 mile zone. He's not going to say, don't do it again.
Not likely, no.
The same with another level of crime in the city. Well, name your crime. The police respond, and they're not going to just say, don't do it again. And that's the philosophy that we've adopted, which is crazy along the southwest border, because there is no consequence to crossing the border illegally. Crossing the border illegally is coming in between the ports of entry. And that is 8 USC 1325.
Mm-hmm.
That is that it's a federal code. And we say, if you don't like it, or if you want to get rid of it, change it, but change the law. Don't put the officer, in this case, the Border Patrol agent, right, the Customs and Border Protection officer, in the middle of this by telling them not to enforce this law.
Yeah, it's enforcement by policy, because they're not, the law is not being adhered to. It's being done by policy.
Correct.
Which I don't understand why. Are most of the people who are being bussed all around the country, are those mostly adults with children, or and it gets back to the law. Who are they and why are they doing it?
So a couple answers to your question, right? The demographics of the population that is being bused to Martha's Vineyard, to Washington D.C, to wherever, right? For the most part, these folks have been encountered along the border and that have been screened for criminal histories, and they are requesting asylum. And because the system is broken, they're extremely backlogged. Instead of saying, we're going to send you back to your home country with the ticket, wait your turn in line, we decided by policy, by executive order, you can come on in. We're going to assign you a court district, a court venue, and you are to report to that immigration court district, and there will be periodic checks. And over the course of the next 2 years, 3 years, someone's going to contact you so that you can come and present your case on whether you have the legal right to be or remain in the United States. And in that time, you have the legal right to be here because you're in pending proceedings. And you can also, to prevent you from becoming a public charge, you can also gain a temporary work permit and go get a job. Again, in theory, it's like the classroom, right? In theory, a lot of the theoretical solutions in a classroom make the world of sense. But when you apply them to real world problems and you apply them to real world environments, they don't work just as you planned them or you spoke to them in a classroom environment, right? It's their environment. The fact of the matter is that a good portion, the majority of these folks may report once or twice, but they're going to get frustrated with the system that there's no adjudication to their case. They're going to find themselves in a situation where I want to move to another county, another state. I don't want to tell immigration where I'm at. And then the likelihood of them going off and, becoming either a public charge, right? Receiving some type of benefit when they're not entitled to, or becoming, falling prey to some type of criminal element because they now fear they can't go to the authorities for protection. They are in the shadows. It's no different than the 18 million, 20 million. I think we lost count how many illegal migrants are in the country that were in the shadows. Well, we're creating another set of people that will lurk in the shadows for a very long time, because once their case is adjudicated, Tony, and if they do show up, what's going to happen when they don't get a favorable adjudication? When the system says, you have a strong case, we hear you, but it doesn't meet the merits of asylum. So now you have to go back. You bought a house, you're employed, you're whatever your status is. What do you think that person's going to do? Are they going to go back on their own accord? Are they going to leave everything that they've worked for in the last 2 or 3 years? So we're creating this other class of society, to be honest with you.
Interesting. I had not thought about that.
Yeah, we're not. We didn't have the stomach many years ago to remove hundreds of thousands of people. This country's not, and it wouldn't make sense. I mean, what do you do? 25 million people. Well, how do you adjudicate that? Tell them all to leave?
Yeah. If you do, how are you going to do it?
Well, we in the last, and when you look at the numbers again, 2 million. And if take whatever number, I don't know the number of those 2 million encounters. That doesn't mean that everybody was let in. Right? Let's be clear about that. I don't want to misrepresent those 2 million. 2 million are Border Patrol agents in green on the front line, interdicting and detecting and processing and countering migrants. Out of those, there's a percentage that are removed, mostly the adults. Single adult male, single adult female. The family units, in a good portion, are being allowed to stay. The examples we gave about being bused to different parts of the county, the country, excuse me, and those numbers every week, every month, every year are increasing. That's the population that I'm sharing with you. That over the course of 1, 2, 3, 5 years. It's going to equate to another 5 million people who are waiting their cases, 7 million who are waiting their cases, and they're not going to come forward. Then what do you do?
Not much you can do, Sal, that I can see. I've heard and have seen evidence that ICE has, ICE hasn't done it on its own accord, but through policy making, executive orders and what have you, they've cut back or pulled back from finding people who've already been convicted or recidivist. They've come across the border once, now they come back again illegally, or just anyone who's here illegally that ICE has had to cut back, not on their own terms, but or on their own accord, have been forced to stop doing that as much as they were, because it seemed like maybe even 6 months or a year ago, they were conducting massive raids all over the country, rounding up people.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I want to pull a string on there that you said. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, right? Specifically, Homeland Security investigation, and for that matter, ERO. They are the two operational and investigative branches within ICE. They have been given instructions, and really it is DHS-wide. In it's a renaming. It's a I would say, yeah, it's issuing a new definition to a criminal alien. Right? Before criminal alien, you would think a criminal alien is anybody who is convicted of a crime and is here illegally, right? The alien part is a term used in the Immigration Nationality Act. A lot of people will take offense to that. Again, we're of the opinion. We're in the opinion. Yeah, if you don't like the term, okay. I like chocolate. You like strawberries. It's subjective what we think, but objectivity is, let's go look at the law. The Immigration and Nationality Act clearly uses that term. Again, if you want to change it, change the law. Mm-hmm. So by executive order, by memorandum, we've redefined some of these terms. We've also redefined what qualifies for an immigration enforcement. Target, focus, whatever the case may be. For example, this is a very complex situation. So to put these restrictions on a law enforcement officer in the following scenario: an immigration enforcement agent, whether it be Border Patrol, Customs Border Protection Officer, Homeland Security Investigations, will have a target of investigation, right? A criminal enterprise that's moving people from Mexico into Lincoln, Nebraska, into Little Rock, Arkansas, wherever the case may be. They are targeting a criminal enterprise. And in the course of their investigation, they're going to have to arrest people at coffee shops. They're going to have to arrest people on the road, traffic stops. They're going to have to arrest people in different areas. If they're not closely tied to that investigation, and then they are questioned as to why they took that arrest, why they made that arrest. And then once they make that arrest, if the person has a DUI, if the person driving without driving while intoxicated, DWI, driving while intoxicated, driving under the influence, right? Different term. But if a person has a misdemeanor, right, that are still threats to society, or even threats to other citizens, domestic abuse, depends if it was adjudicated or not. There's these very silly roadmaps that have been drawn out, connecting the dots of what a criminal alien is, should be. And so the agent cannot deport that individual because the individual does not meet the threshold, does not meet the criteria of a criminal alien. So imagine, again, going back to the analogy of a police officer. There's a law that says you can't exceed the speed limit beyond X amount of miles per hour. And if you do that, the police officer is forced to, well, I pulled you over, but I can't give you a ticket. I can't arrest you.
Mm-hmm. That's a good analogy.
That's what's happening with, it's not redefining the term to make it more palatable or more politically correct. It's redefining the term with the intent of creating these loopholes for bad guys. That's what's happening. That's the result of these terms being redefined.
Who are redefining them? Does this go all the way up? Well, I assume it has to go all the way up to the top. And
there's several memorandums that have come down from Secretary Mayorkas on the term of illegal alien. If you remember, Chief Rodney Scott, chief of the Border Patrol, took offense to that. He pushed back, saying, "Careful, it's not just redefining the term, right? It's first of all, it's the law. So are you asking us to not enforce the law? Because you can't reinterpret the law." we can have a challenge on a certain interpretation of sections of the law, but the law is the law, I guess. So these terms, yes, have been put in place by policy, by memorandum, by Secretary Mayorkas, and really tying both hands of the immigration enforcement agent. So to go and to think about people in a stash house being exploited by farming companies, being exploited by different agricultural companies, whatever the company is that's exploiting these folks, for an immigration enforcement agent to get involved takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and again, to build that case, to get to the big head honchos, you do have to make these arrests, and they're not being allowed to many times.
How many additional Border Patrol agents do you think or estimate there should be at this point? And is there any? I haven't looked at the latest legislation or what's coming up for the next fiscal year, but it doesn't seem to me that there's a big change in budgeting for hiring more Border Patrol agents.
Right. If you recall, there was, I think currently Border Patrol is sitting at 19,200, something like that.
And that's for both the North and the South.
That is nationwide, right? So the Border Patrol, yes, patrols primarily. We're here at the southwest border. That's 2,000 miles. U.S. and Mexico, but then you have another 3,500, depending how you count the northern border with Canada, and then the agents also patrol Puerto Rico, Florida, right, New Orleans. So on the books, the congressionally authorized levels is 19, right under 19,500, I believe, 19,500, but the Border Patrol has never been at full strength. If not mistaken, they're running about 17,000 and change. So about 2,500 to 3,000 under that congressionally authorized number. There was some language, if you recall, under the previous administration for an extra 5,000. Don't think that was funded. There's some language, I think, in 23 for 3,000. I don't know how much funding was received for that in FY 23 or 24. But so you answer the question, what is the number? We've always used the term personnel, technology, and infrastructure, right? The three-legged stool to addressing, not even solving border security, but just addressing border security. And so you do need some personnel. We talked about the autonomous surveillance towers. We talked about some very automated and autonomous type of systems that are being introduced, which help. If they can save man hours, which equal to less manpower, and we work smarter, not harder, that's not only a cost saving to the government, but it also is a better way of addressing border security, right? When you have one agent in a command and control room and you have autonomy working in your favor and it's alerting you of incursions, that's the better use of that personnel and the better use of that technology and the better use of government funds, to be quite honest, versus what we have right now, 5 to 7 agents, sometimes even the National Guard are helping us out, monitoring a bank of 40 cameras, and it's all pan, zoom, tilt, and it's labor intensive, right? So there has to be that balance between the number of people, but the technology. But I want to bring up that, yes, there was a push for, I think, 3,000 more agents. We'll see if Congress funds that. But there was no request for significant border security technology in the FY24 proposal. I challenge you to go look at the president's FY24 proposal and peel the onion of what's being proposed for border security technology. That doesn't exist. It's almost as if, it's deliberate. There's no challenging that. If you're serious about managing this flow, part of your proposal, right, from the White House to Congress would be, hey, I need some smart technology. Don't even add more agents. How about some smart technology? Don't even add more wall if that politically is not in your favor. But how can we argue that technology is not the best way to manage this very dynamic border situation? Won't technology help agents, again, deal with this humanitarian crisis at the same time of having some level of security?
Yes. Which kind of segues into what you and I had talked about offline, is this problem with the TCO, the transnational criminal organizations, just swarming areas with drones, and Border Patrol not having, practically not having nearly enough counter drone technology. And I haven't found anything in the budget that is asking for more funding for counter drone technology. Talk about that, because that's become a serious problem.
We just saw, right, the National League series, Padres Dodgers, was interrupted by a drone. We've seen not only, famous actors' weddings being interrupted by drones, but we have some significant events that it's not just a disruption. I mean, just think about it. If the disruption, yes, causes a financial impact by shutting an event down, by stopping, some type of concert or what have you, but it has serious national security implications, because what's next? So if the intent is to grab that drone, put it in an area where you can grab that picture and make millions, what if the intent is to grab that drone, put something on the drone, and kill hundreds of thousands of people? Right? I mean, that's the threat in the airspace that is emerging, and an area, ironically enough, that I've gotten very involved in the last 6 to 8 months. To say that in my visits to the southwest border, I've learned, for example, just in Rio Grande Valley sector, right? It spans for, I believe, the sector 170 miles, 200 miles, and specifically in Rio Grande Valley, McAllen Station. But they have a very dense population, and the drones that are being flown there every day, there's about 200 to 300 illicit sightings per day, Tony. 21,000 illicit drone sightings launched from Mexico in Mexican airspace, which by matter of international law, there's nothing that U.S. can do for whether it's recreational or whether it's somebody with nefarious intent, right? Flying a drone in Mexican airspace. But these bad guys are flying their drones and counting the number of Border Patrol agents on shift, identifying their location, and then they're countering that counterintelligence with moving people or moving drugs remotely using drones. That's one problem set. The other one is that they're using the drones actually to move narcotics from south to north. So, and our level of our capability, the Border Patrol's capability to detect, identify, track, and mitigate is I've said you've heard me use this term before. It's like they're using baling wire and duct tape, because it is not a comprehensive bill to suit the needs or the requirements of these frontline men and women. The technology that they're using is piecemeal. It's not integrated, and there's still a lot of manual labor involved in operating this technology. And I bring up Rio Grande Valley just because it's one of the 9 southwest border sectors.
Yeah.
It's the largest, but it has some detection capability, and they know enough to know that they're getting beat. Day in and day out, they're getting beat. And that presents another challenge. There are, to your point, there is an executive national action plan on a counter drone strategy. I think there's 13, 15 steps, areas of focus that the White House put out. There's been congressional oversight hearing on some of the authorities that were granted to certain law enforcement agencies to conduct counter drone mitigation efforts, right? The mitigation being, there's technology out there where that it'll detect it, it'll identify it, it'll tell you what type of drone, and you can track it. But the key is, you don't want to be just a security observer. You want to be a security officer and be able to take it down, right? You want to be able to actually
that counter drone takedown technology does exist.
It's out there. I mean, we use it. We use it Oconus, right? And some of it is off the shelf. I mean, so it's not difficult to tap into. But the point I want to bring up is that there is no congressional funding supporting the counter drone strategy that the president put out. There was an op-ed a couple of days ago from Secretary Mayorkas. I encourage you to read it. It's him pleading, identifying the threat and vulnerabilities that exist, and him pleading with Congress to put some money where their mouth is in terms of, if they think it's a threat, then identify some funding, push it in the right direction, right? So some of this counter drone, counter unmanned aerial system technology can get in the hands of the operators, and we can start doing something with it. So yeah, that's another area of focus. That is, we think of counter drone technology can be used again in high profile events, whether they be baseball, football, huge gatherings, but also critical to protect critical infrastructure, right? Whether it's our power plants, whether it's our water storage facilities, whether it's places of security facilities. What is a little bit different and challenging is drone interruptions at an event, drone interruptions at an airport are different than counter drone activity along the southwest border. But again, it provides a different set of challenges. The technology's out there. Many people have addressed, many companies have addressed that issue overseas, and they're doing a great job of it. Yeah, we're not going to probably incorporate some kinetic or blow a drone out of the sky in a populated area, right? But there's other safer and very interesting technologies that I have seen.
I have too.
Yeah. So I think that is right now a big vulnerability that CBP is facing, and hopefully this FY22 budget will include some funding for counter drone technology.
I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope so. Two of the things I wanted to ask you about is cloned vehicles. I think I get all the updates from just about every border patrol station every day. If people did get all of those every day and just see what's going on, I think they probably would be stunned at what's going on. from every station every day. You know, I mean, it's like getting the lists from all of the U.S. attorneys around the country. It's, you know, it's just, you know, long. What about the cloned vehicles? I in some of those reports I get daily, I've noticed that has seemed to have picked up, or I've noticed more of that lately than had been happening in the past.
Yeah, the cloned vehicle problem has been going on since I came in the early 90s. I mean, everything from UPS trucks to FedEx trucks to Border Patrol vehicles to, you know, electric company vehicles. I mean, look, the smugglers are ingenious. They have a lot of time to plot. They have a lot of money to execute their plots. And so the cloned vehicle interceptions, encounters, kind of ebbs and flows. And I haven't looked at the numbers, but if you're saying that you've seen a recent rash, I would say that, first of all, again, reshaping the problem set of what's happening at the border. It is not people just walking across the river and turning themselves in, right? A cloned vehicle is used to transport people once they're already in the United States to a staging point and or to further their entry. Those people have no intention to turn themselves in, right? Those folks have no intention to seek asylum. So if the number of cloned vehicles up, it's probably in line with the increase of people wanting to get away and the actual numbers of gotaways. So it correlates, right?
It correlates. That's what I was seeing too.
The number of stash houses too, Tony, right? People in hotels. People in hotels tells me in hotels, in houses that are used as stash houses, those folks have already crossed the border. They're not 2 miles from the border. Many times they're 10, 20, 15 miles north of the border. So that organization's intent and or the smuggled aliens' intent is to go undetected. And if they go undetected, they're not going to get a court hearing. They want nothing to do with a court hearing. And that's another population, again, that we're feeding into this shadows that we've created, that it's going to go unaddressed and living in the shadows because they were never processed as asylum seekers. They have no intention of showing up to a court, and they will be, you know, roaming throughout the United States and probably functional citizens of society, fine, but some of them will not. And it's not until we find out that, you know, a police officer was shot by an undocumented migrant, a daughter was abducted and raped by an undocumented, right? And that's when we get enraged. That's what we get upset, rightfully so. But we should get upset when we see these clone vehicles and we see people in stash houses. That's what's feeding this craziness.
Yeah, you know, and I see those in the reports that come out every day from all the Border Patrol sectors and stations. It's just incomprehensible. That's why I said I think if people truly just did a month of watching and reading, reading these reports, they'd be stunned. It's just overwhelming. One point I wanted to make about the cloned vehicles is I think when I was editor of Homeland Security Today, we did, I think, the first report on that problem. And I remember later on, somebody tipped me off, and that was a serious incident in which they caught, I don't remember what the circumstance was for the van to be stopped, but it was a cloned Department of Homeland Security van filled with illegals wearing Marine uniforms.
Oh yeah. That was if I'm not mistaken, it was San Clemente, California.
I believe so. Yeah, it was in California.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's getting pretty brazen.
Yeah. And I think, it was 13, 14 passengers, all undocumented migrants wearing camo gear as they were going. I think Camp Pendleton is what the storyline was, right? With the fake storyline. But yeah, again, that. And you know what's even more shocking is that we've almost have gotten used to people in military fatigues. That story you're talking about was quite some time ago, but even today we encounter people in the desert, in the mountains, along the southwest border, wearing military gear. Tony, we've become immune to this. I hate for there to be a time, right, where those military fatigues are being worn by bad guys with bad intentions, meaning that they're issuing these military fatigues to help the migrants blend in the environment that they're being smuggled. But those same military fatigues are being used by drug traffickers and human smugglers that are carrying weapons, right? And so the mixing of the cover, the fatigue, and using them on migrants, as well as bad guys using them when they're smuggling dope, when they're smuggling people with long arms, is a recipe for disaster. Is a recipe for disaster. A confrontation can ensue, easily become very, very, very problematic. Right?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I mean, mistaking a threat based on the camo. I mean, we've seen some ghillie suits. Very, very, very. I mean, a very, I would say, sophisticated manner of smuggling humans, also being used by the bad guys protecting their loads. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
What I was going to say about the violence that these TCOs represent, I was shocked when I spent a couple of days down in Nogales with the port director and a lot of CDP people down there. And as he was personally driving me around, he pulled up to a check southbound checkpoint building, and he points up and says, "See that hole up there?" And I looked at it and I said, "Yeah, it looks like a bullet hole." And he said, "That's exactly what it is. It's an AK-47 round." And come to find out, the story was that they left it there for a reason. That I don't recall how long before it had happened, but it was the same afternoon after the port of entry, as well as Nogales city police had caught two cars filled with millions of dollars in cash. I guess they thought they were going to get through and across the border. And that same later that evening, somebody from that ridge you know about, just right outside the perimeter in Mexico, the Nogales POE opened fire on the port. And luckily nobody was killed or hurt, but there was a bullet hole right there on American soil in American port. I've got photographs of it.
Yeah. I've heard.
It made no news whatsoever.
Yeah, fortunately, I mean, the violence that we've seen more recently, and again, it's all the cause and effect of the government's stance against or for this illegal immigration, craziness that we're living. Because when bad guys think they can get away, bad guys will also do bad things to anybody that stands in their way, right? And so you'll start seeing increase in agent assaults, right? Again, for the most part, a Border Patrol agent, 2 agents, 3 agents will go and encounter a group, sometimes 5, 10, 15, 20 people. More commonplace today is 110, 150. And yeah, again, for the most part, you can size up a group and yeah, okay, the smuggler's in here somewhere, right? There's 1 or 2 or 3 smugglers in the group. And if you don't have that strong officer presence, if you don't have that operational mindset, and like we said, you know, your head on a swivel, really looking at the entire situation, fully aware, they will size you up and they will take advantage of you being overwhelmed caring for a mother and her child, or, you know, taking care of an injured individual for either to get away or to assault you and get away.
I was going to ask you.
That threat is real. That threat is real. And,
Yeah,
and it happens.
I was going to ask you about that. You know, this was in March 2014. Don't know if anybody can see it or not. The cover story I did, Deadly Patrol.
Deadly Patrol, yeah.
Has the rockings or physical assaults with whatever kind of weapon, are they on the increase? I mean, I looked at the statistics lately, and it looks like there is an upward trend again, especially in certain categories of how an agent is assaulted, whether it be with just physically with fist or whatever, knives, guns, or rockings.
Yeah.
For the audience, rockings is they're hurling rocks, and these are not pebbles that you find in your backyard. These are chunks of concrete, chunks of big rock. Many agents have been injured. We've got a lot of photographs. We're going to be doing a video report update on that story, but it does seem like, according to the Border Patrol CBP statistics, that assault incidents have been going up. Is that true?
Yeah, I have read a couple of recent reports. One I was trying to pull up from CBP, where they were addressing the types of assaults, and I wanted to go into a little bit deeper what you said about, oddly enough, and I'm going to double check after I say this, but I wonder if, and I believe the number of rockings against Border Patrol agents don't compare to previous years. The type of assaults are more physical confrontation.
Yeah, I think
not so much from a.
I believe that you're right. The physical assaults have gone up. Rockings, I mean, they're still occurring, still large numbers, but they haven't. They haven't gone up as much as they have in the past. But other categories.
And the point I was going to make with the rocking assaults, right? If you remember, the rocking assaults primarily happen with bad guy on the south side, many times no barrier in between, and the Border Patrol agent on foot or in a vehicle. And so out of frustration, by default or by design, the bad guy would hurl rocks at the agent while maybe he was making arrests, right? Crack his skull open or cause severe damage to the vehicle. I'd like to be able to parallel, and many people have said that it is the rockings have, in those environments, have gone down primarily because of the 30-foot border wall that was put in place, right? Yeah. And so the direct target, the direct attack that used to happen 5, 7, 10 years ago is not happening right now.
Yeah. Right. That did stop it, because in the past, I mean, they were getting up on ladders and hurling big chunks of concrete down on Border Patrol vehicle.
Yeah, there were weapons. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, when a projectile like that can cause a concussion or can break skin or break your skull, cut you open, and now you're lying there, A, whether you were making an arrest, or B, you were taking control of the situation. Now you're lying there. Now you're vulnerable. Right now, in a law enforcement environment, that's like the, you know, one of the deadly funnels, right? You're incapacitated, and now the bad guy has access to your gun, right? To do you harm, to do others harm. That's probably any law enforcement officer's worst nightmare for that to happen. And that those scenarios were real. I mean, we're not dramatizing anything.
Oh no, I've got
2, 3 in the morning. Yeah, right. Yeah, 2, 3 in the morning, out in the middle of nowhere, Tony, 1, 2 agents, male, female agent, trying to control, make an arrest. And then from the south side, you have, you know, people just hurling rocks at you and pelting you with rocks. Yeah, it was a threat. It's a danger. And I think we're seeing, I saw some videos from Imperial Beach where one agent was trying to make an arrest, and then another bad guy jumped from the Mexican side and that confronted him, and you know, the crowd built up. Another agent came to support, and they went round and round, the agent trying to use his collapsible baton. But these confrontations, middle of the day, it only happens. I mean, how does someone, you know, they get emboldened and they become brazen because there's no consequences, because they know that, you know, everything's in their favor.
Yeah,
there's no consequence to their illegal activity.
Yeah, there are no consequences.
Yeah,
I think that's been driven home very clearly by just seeing what is happening right now.
And so when you hear, again, I want to bring this up to how kind of when we started, when we say, right, in law enforcement or specifically Border Patrol, when they say and we hear morale is at an all-time low, it's agents are resilient. They are used to working in the most inhospitable places known to man. They are known that they thrive working by themselves and doing, you know, service to country type of work. Right? There's a DNA strand that's common amongst Border Patrol agents that it's give me car keys, give me some binos, and I'll go take care of the mission, right? So they're used to very little, knowing that they have to do so much. And so when collectively society, policy, administration, management, when all these things line up that are not supporting the agent by giving him the very basic tools to do his job, they don't want a lot. Again, car keys and a set of binoculars. Let me go and take care of my area of responsibility. I'll go catch bad guys.
Yeah. Every man and woman in green I've met is exactly that.
And when they see, not feel, when they see the Horse Patrol incident in Del Rio, when they see, you know, policy changing, making their job that much more attainable, right? The mission starts eroding, the progress starts eroding. And so it affects people mentally. And they're again, these folks are mission oriented. Imagine if you had soldiers on the front line fighting the war, wherever that war is, and them worrying about if I take action, my commander is going to fire me, or I'm going to go to jail, right? If I'm doing this within policy, within regulation, and I'm taking care of business, I just give me my paycheck. Most soldiers will probably just say, just give me my paycheck. I don't want accolades. I don't want anything. But when you not only not give them their paycheck, and then you start disciplining them for frivolous and political, spectacles, it affects the morale of an agent. And when the agent doesn't want to go and do his or her job, that puts him or her in danger, and it puts us in danger too, Tony.
Yeah.
Because we're the benefactors of this security.
Yeah. in that situation, you don't have, somebody doesn't have your back, or somebody doesn't have somebody else's back.
Right.
It causes a real problem.
That's right.
Absolutely does. One last thing I wanted to ask you, Sal, is about terrorists or people on various watch lists that are being caught. Do you have a number? Or can you talk about?
I don't have an actual number, Tony. I think we briefly talked about that a while ago on the we hear a little bit about the terrorist screening database, right? TSDB hits, and if I'm not mistaken, that's a feud that's ongoing right now. Here we go. So in 2022, right? Since we're talking about the southwest border, and so, from October to August, right? So the year is not over. We had 63 folks that were encountered in the southwest border, compared to 103 last year, right? 279 in fiscal year, the same time period, October to August, compared to 54 in the northern border. 279 compared to 54. And so total, there's been a 100% increase in TSDB encounters this fiscal year compared to the full fiscal year last year. In fiscal year 2021, we had 157 TSDB encounters, right? And that's, go ahead.
But what typically happens to those people?
Well, and I gave you CBP OFO numbers, right? Because because TSDB encounters, right? These are people from various different nationalities, will be identified at the airport by our Mexican counterparts, or at the port of entry, or in between the port of entry, right? There's a lot of different nets that we've extended, a lot of different capabilities that we have to identify somebody who is a TSDB. Again, terrorist screening database is really somebody. You could be a full blown positively identified terrorist, or you can be somebody who has affiliation somehow, somewhere. Right. But we got to remember, without getting too much into details, what happens overseas in some of these countries, there's partial information that's received, and that's racked and stacked, collated, uploaded into databases. And it doesn't mean that the person that we encounter on the southwest border actually is the person who detonating some type of a weapon overseas, right? Or that was even in the area. There's some type of linkage. It could be a loose linkage, or it could be a very direct linkage to terrorist activity.
Yeah. Somehow some intelligence somewhere has made the connection.
Correct. So you do have to treat these carefully, because you cannot make the assumption that, okay, this is a terrorist, right? But those numbers are up, and that should be concerning, right? Those numbers are up, and so what typically happens is CBP works with Department of Justice, the FBI, right? There's these interworking relationships. You've heard the Joint Terrorist Task Force. If there's an alert, a person is segregated. Then other searches are done, and using different types of databases, you go into classified environments, and now you start trying to corroborate the person's path and history, and kind of try to match, screen, and verify, if you will, the information you have on your government systems with the person in front of you. And that's usually done by the FBI and others. So that net that we talked about is extremely important. And that's why working with our partners, whether it be Mexico or Panama, right, where we have these different collection points, that helps us get an understanding of how these people got here, right? Where did they come? Southwest border, okay, but before the southwest border, did they fly into Mexico City? Did they fly into Cancun? who were they with, right? A group of Chinese or by themselves? So that investigation takes quite a bit of skill, and certainly the technological resources, right, to verify that this person encountered is not here with the purpose of doing grave harm, or that the person that we encountered is not the person that already did some grave harm somewhere else.
Yeah.
So yeah, very, very, very concerning. And again, if that filter of people, and I don't want to sound cold because they are human beings, but if the border security filter of human beings along the southwest border is not tight, then TSDB people with bad intentions, or criminal organizations with bad intentions, or other people with bad intentions will get through the screen. We'll get through the filter.
They'll get through.
Yeah.
Last question. And this is going to be a hard one to answer because I can't even answer it. What do you see on the horizon? Whether a different party takes control during the midterms or doesn't, do you see any hope for tightening up the border, re-engaging the border wall building, technology? What do you see, if anything, happening that's going to help this situation? Because it's only going to get worse. As you pointed out, as Todd Bensman pointed out earlier today, the numbers are just unprecedented and bad guys are getting through. Is it going to take something catastrophic to happen before lawmakers get off their ass?
Yeah, Tony, I mean, your last statement is where my head went with your question, is if in catastrophic can mean a lot of different things, right? A mass casualty type of scenario by an undocumented migrant, or some very coordinated attack by bad actors, whether they be from Russia or from Syria or from other parts of the world, right? I mean, it can run the gamut, but a catastrophic event in the United States, unfortunately, in my opinion, would be the only like fire under people's rear that would spring them into action. If not, I think we're going to see status quo. We're going to see helping Mexico, helping Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, helping them help us, throwing hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in that direction without seeing tangible results. That's to me, that's on the global scale. Paring that down, I think in the next 2-3 years, without either this administration, I mean, because you have guys like Henry Cuellar, and you have other folks who are saying, "Oh, wait a minute, we cannot just turn a 180 to what the previous administration did." I mean, okay, can we agree on certain things that we do need technology? We need to strengthen border security. We can't just continue having this, open borders. I mean, too many people is not closed borders. There's nothing closed about it. So I think the focus on technology has to be that happy ground. We know that this administration wants to do nothing with wall. That is like 100%. Probably willing to lose elections over that issue. And okay, neither here nor there, but at the cost of what, right? And so, okay, no border wall. Again, we've said personnel, technology, and infrastructure. Border wall is infrastructure. How about technology? Can we agree that technology can save lives? Can we agree that by having an early detection system, a technology-based early detection system of people coming across, will help them, prevent them from dying in the desert, the dehydrations, right? Rescue people over there in trouble. Can we at least agree on that? If we can't, on both sides, of the aisle come to an agreement on one of these three pillars of border security, then we're almost kind of waiting for the inevitable, some catastrophic event. I hate to even talk that way, but it's.
Yeah, I know. I don't either.
You know?
It's kind of like the situation in Ukraine with Russia. Will
Yeah.
Putin use tactical nukes or won't he? We've done some programs on that we're publishing this week. Yeah. Sal, those are the questions I had for you. Is there anything outstanding that we haven't talked about that you would like to?
No, I think, Tony, I thank you for having me on. It's been a little too long. We have to do this a little bit more often. It's a great conversation, but I think it also sheds some light, right? Some real insights, ground truth on the problem set, and not necessarily about pointing fingers, because there's solutions to be had here. But the one thing I always, and you know me, I will always bleed green, as we said. I'd be remiss if I did not thank you for bringing me on and for giving me an opportunity to kind of be the champion of the frontline men and women, whether they wear tan, whether they wear blue, whether they wear green. CBP frontline officers, agents, and personnel are doing a phenomenal job, and they do feel that the world is on their shoulders, that the security of this country rests on their shoulders. And whether whether you're a bad person who spits at them, or whether you treat them disrespectful at an airport or at a land port, or whether you encounter them at a coffee shop and you turn your back on these fine men and women, you just know that they're here to serve the country, and the mission that they are enduring is nothing less than protecting America. So I would challenge all your listeners to a simple thank you, a simple thumbs up, a simple I appreciate what you're doing for the safety and security of our country when they do come in contact with an officer in blue, an agent in green, or an officer in tan. That would be my ask. That would be my challenge to your audience, to thank them for sometimes a thankless job. And they put their lives on the line, Tony. You and I will go to sleep tonight, and we will have a great night's rest, but they are out there protecting us so that we can have a great night's rest, and we can have the quality of life that we are enjoying today.
Every day. Yeah, I see it up close and personal, and I've met a lot, and I have the utmost respect for what the green, blue, tan do, because it is a thankless job, and they are unsung heroes, in my opinion.
Agreed.
And I will tell you this: I've met a lot, and I've always asked, "Hey, have you ever heard of Sal Zamora? Do you know him?" You're well known. You're well known.
I've been around. Have had the pleasure to work a lot of different places with some great people.
You're thought of very highly. I'll put it that way.
Thank you, Tony. It's a pleasure not only to be here, but obviously to represent as an alumni of CBP.
I think you guys, once you're CBP or BP, you always are. It's kind of like being an old counterintelligence analyst. That mindset stays with you.
I agree. Thanks again for having me on, Tony. I appreciate that.
Thanks so much, folks. It's been another edition of Homeland Security Today Off the Record. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, click the bell to be notified when all shows are published. And we'll see you next time. Sal, thank you so much again.
Great seeing you, Tony. Be safe.
You too. Bye-bye.